Imagine living in a land where you pay taxes but have no say in how you're governed. Imagine being ruled by a king who lives thousands of miles away across an ocean. Now imagine a group of ordinary colonists deciding to challenge the most powerful empire on Earth. What happened next would change world history forever. The United States wasn't always a country. It began as 13 small British colonies along the eastern coast of North America. But within a few decades, those colonies would launch a revolution, defeat Britain, and create one of the most powerful nations in history. This is the story of how the United States was born. The story begins in 1607. England established its first permanent settlement in North America at Jamestown, Virginia. Over the next century, more colonies appeared along the Atlantic coast. Eventually, there were 13 British colonies. The people living there considered themselves British citizens. For many years, life was relatively peaceful. Farmers grew crops, merchants traded goods. Ports such as Boston, New York, and Philadelphia became important centers of commerce. Because Britain was far away, the colonists gradually developed a habit of governing themselves. They elected local leaders and managed many local affairs without direct interference from London. But that freedom would not last forever. Everything changed after Britain fought a series of expensive wars. The British government was heavily in debt. To recover money, new taxes were imposed on the American colonies. The colonists were furious. They argued that they were being taxed without representation in Parliament. Their message was simple: no taxation without representation. Protests spread across the colonies. Many Americans believed Britain was taking away their rights. Tensions continued to rise. Then, in 1773, a dramatic act of protest shocked the British Empire. Colonists boarded ships in Boston Harbor and dumped hundreds of chests of tea into the water. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded harshly. Instead of restoring peace, the conflict became even more dangerous. By 1775, tensions finally exploded into war. British soldiers and colonial militias clashed at Lexington and Concord. These battles marked the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. At first, many colonists still hoped to remain part of the British Empire. But as fighting continued, attitudes changed. A writer named Thomas Paine published a pamphlet called Common Sense. It argued that it was absurd for a continent to be ruled by a distant island. The pamphlet became one of the most influential publications in American history. For many colonists, independence now seemed possible. In 1776, colonial leaders gathered in Philadelphia. A committee was assigned to explain why the colonies should become independent. The primary author was Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wrote a document that would change history. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. The colonies officially declared themselves free from British rule. The Declaration introduced revolutionary ideas. It stated that people possess natural rights. It argued that governments derive power from the consent of the governed. And it claimed that citizens have the right to replace governments that become tyrannical. The United States of America had been born, but now it had to survive. Declaring independence was one thing. Winning it was another. Britain was the most powerful empire in the world. The colonies had fewer soldiers, less money, and fewer resources. Leading the American forces was George Washington. The struggle seemed impossible. Yet the Americans had one major advantage. They were fighting for their homeland. Even more importantly, France entered the conflict and provided crucial support. French money, troops, and naval forces helped turn the tide. After years of fighting, the decisive moment came in 1781. At Yorktown, British forces were surrounded and forced to surrender. The war was effectively over.
Sovereign and independent.
In 1783, Britain officially recognized American independence. The United States was now a sovereign nation. But another challenge remained. How should this new country govern itself? The founders wanted to avoid creating another king, so they designed a system that divided power among different branches of government. In 1787, the Constitution was written. It established the framework that still guides the United States today. A few years later, George Washington became America's first president. The American experiment had begun. The United States was not created overnight. It emerged from decades of growth, conflict, revolutionary ideas, and war. What began as 13 British colonies became a nation founded on the belief that governments should serve the people. Whether viewed as a success, a work in progress, or both, America's creation remains one of the most important events in human history. And it all started with a simple question: who has the right to govern a people? The answer given in 1776 would inspire independence movements around the world for generations to come. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to World We Know and join us as we explore the events that shaped our world.